Good evening, ladies and gentle drunks. My name is Kevin Olson. I'm a recovered alcoholic. It is my great pleasure to invite you all to the fourth dimension. Big book study, that is. Thank you all for being here. I'm glad you're all here. I know I'm certainly glad I'm here. I certainly know I need to be here. I apologize for being a minute late. Zoom decided this would be a good time to start doing some updates on Zoom. So anyway, here we are. For those of you who would, let's kick off, as we always do, with the set-aside prayer, which goes a little something like this. God, please set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, about the 12 steps, and please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. Okay, and as this is the fourth dimension big book study, I always like to read the two parts of the book that refer to the fourth dimension. So first of all, on page 8, Bill Wilson writes that I was soon to be catapulted to what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Happiness, peace, and usefulness. I love it. My sponsor talks to me all the time about the importance of just being useful. So then on page 25, Bill Wilson writes that we have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. So we are going to be catapulted. We are going to be rocketed. And for those of you who would, for the sake of tradition, everybody please put one hand up like this. Everybody put another hand up like this. Yeah, and everybody go, oh yeah. Oh, yeah, we absolutely insist on enjoying life, man. I absolutely insist on enjoying life, and I'm very pleased to be here. And I'm excited to take you guys through what we're going to go through tonight. I'm going to do my very level best to land this plane in exactly 1 hour. And tonight we're going to talk a lot about AA history, and we're going to be primarily focusing on the forward to the second edition. But I am going to bounce around a little bit to kind of fortify some of what I'm talking about. So get nimble with your fingers and be ready to flip around to a couple different pages. But for the most part, we're going to be focusing on the forward to the second edition. Now, last week, we learned something really foundational, and that foundational piece of what we talked about. Can you guys see the whiteboard tonight? Is it okay? I'm still working on getting the audio visual here good to go, but thumbs up, somebody thumbs up if you can see the whiteboard, see what's on it. Good to go? Okay. This is the transition that I need to make as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in AA. I need to make a transition from being a taker to being a giver, okay? And this is foundational, and I want this to inform everything that we are going to talk about over the course of the next, many weeks together. And of course, Scott Lee, so this taker to giver concept comes from my great grand sponsor, a great man by the name of Chuck Chamberlain, Chuck C, a great early member of AA. If you've never listened to Chuck Chamberlain, don't go to sleep tonight until you've listened to Chuck C, okay? And then this other concept of becoming a receiver, okay? So on the path from becoming a taker to a giver, we need to become receivers, okay? We need to be able to receive God's power that lifts us up towards becoming a giver. And how do we become receivers? Simple, by doing 12 steps. We have 12 simple spiritual actions that a guy like me can take in order to become a better receiver for the power of God, okay? The power of God, I believe, was always with me, has always been with me, and will always be with me. The problem is not the power of God, the problem is me. The problem is that I am cut off, and there are a few people more cut off than members of the alcoholics and drug addicts, when they first get to recovery, completely cut off from that power. And our program is not one of addition. I didn't need to have anything added to me in order to receive God's power. I needed to have things removed from me. Okay, our program is one of subtraction, taking things away from inside of me that were cutting me off from that power. Chuck Chamberlain refers to it as uncovering, discovering, and discarding the things within me that are blocking me from this power, okay? So this is fundamentally, I want you guys to always be mindful and always be thinking of, I know everyone comes to this, the fourth dimension study on Tuesday, and it's probably, for y'all, it's probably a lot like tuning into a TV show, right? Like I'm gonna tune into the fourth dimension, right? And I'm just gonna sit back and I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna take, okay? Guys, please, that is not the intent of this study. The intent of this study is to arm you with information and to arm you with this program, so that you can go out as spiritual warriors for God. Big book thumping soldiers who can go out into the recovery community and recovery and your meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and carry this message. And we learned last week, as we read through the preface and the foreword of the first edition, that our fellowship over the last many years has gotten away from the fundamental message of the big book. If you'll recall, we talked about between 1939 and 1955, 300,000 copies of the book went into the world. From those copies, 150,000 sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous got sober in that period of time. Unbelievable. Why? Because at that time, there was nothing else to do but go through the book, do the work that was suggested in the book, and go carry the message to someone else. When I stay close to that fundamental message, amazing things happen. Amazing things have happened in my life. Amazing things have happened in the lives of everyone. Please do me a favor and just make sure everyone's muted if you can. Appreciate it. Remarkable things can happen in the recovery community when I stay close to the message in the big book. We used to be a book that gave rise to a fellowship. Okay. Today, I think it's much more likely that what I see a lot is that we're a fellowship that also has a book once in a while. Once in a while, we have a book that we talk about, okay? And the real purpose of this study and what's happened to me and what has been taught to me is that the closer I adhere to the message of Alcoholics Anonymous in the big book and nowhere else, the more success I've had in my recovery and the more success I've had in sponsoring other men and other people in recovery. So I think it's fundamental to stay close to this book and to understand. The other thing we talked about last week is that how AA kind of grew around the world. The way that AA grew around the world was not from, a bunch of AA meetings. The way the message of AA was transferred around the world was through this book and nothing else. Okay. 1939, 1940, 1941, a singular person by themselves with this book doing the actions asked of me to do within this book. That was enough to get someone sober. And what would be the next thing that they would do? The next thing that they would do then is go carry that message to someone else, because that's what the program demands of us. Okay. This book is a spiritual vortex. When I open the big book up, only good things come from this book. And when I do the actions contained within this book, my life changes, okay? Creates within me what's described as a personality change, sufficient to bring on recovery from alcoholism. I identify myself as a recovered alcoholic today. And what I mean by that is that as the result of these steps, I have connected to a power greater than myself that has expelled my obsession to drink. That's really it. It's that simple, okay? I believe that the most important word in Alcoholics Anonymous is the word do. D-O. I'm going to erase this. I'm going to write this down. Most important word in all of AA for me. It's that word right there. It's the only thing that matters in Alcoholics Anonymous. What I do in AA changes everything. What I think, how I feel, how I believe, all of that stuff has never made any difference in my recovery. The only thing that's ever made any difference in my recovery are the things that I do, okay, in AA. I think this is the most important word in all of AA. Alcoholics Anonymous did not work for me when I needed it. And Alcoholics Anonymous, unfortunately, did not even work for me when I wanted it. Alcoholics Anonymous only works for me when I will do it. And my grant sponsor, Clancy, always says the steps in AA don't care why I take them. We do not have a motivational requirement here. Has anyone ever heard that before? Well, I was doing it for the wrong reasons, and I was doing it for other people. You need to do it for yourself. You can't do it for other people. That's not true. That's not accurate. You can do it for other people. We don't care why you do it. If I do it, no matter why I'm doing it, I will get well. If I don't do it, I will not get well. I will not stay sober, and I will not recover from this hideous disease. So I believe the most important word in Alcoholics Anonymous is the word do. Okay? I think it's even more important than the word God. And I think that God smiles and knows deeply in his heart and my heart what I mean when I say that. He knows what I mean when I say that. Because it's the actions that I take that get me connected to God. And one of the things I always like to point out is that, like, the big book doesn't get me sober. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't get me sober. The 12 steps don't get me sober. The big book doesn't get me sober. All of these things are specifically designed to do what? To get me connected to God, to the power, and the power gets me sober. You guys with me on that? Can I get an oh yeah? Can I get an oh yeah? There you go. I love it. I see Benjamin. He's like, yeah. It's awesome, man. Great. I'm glad you're here again. It's good to see you, buddy. Okay, that's all that matters. Now, does anyone want to know what I think are the two most dangerous words in all of AA? These words. No. I know. These are the two most dangerous words in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? I know. No, I know. No, Kevin, what you need to do. No, I know. Kevin, have you ever thought, yeah or no, I know. Kevin, did you do your step 5? I know. Lethal. These words. I know. Okay? The problem is that even, there are things that I might not want to do. I can hear responsees say, I don't want to, I don't like it, I hate you, I'm afraid of it, I'm angry at you. It's fine, as long as they're doing it. But the words I know are like this force field that goes up where there isn't even information being transferred across, okay? So some of you may be here tonight, and part of why we say the set-aside prayer. Some of you may be thinking, oh, early AA history, I know. Well, maybe there's something for you guys to learn tonight. Maybe there's something for me to learn tonight in what we're going to go through, okay? So we're going to go through early AA history, and we're going to talk about the magic of how this thing came together. And, my grand sponsor, Clancy, put on this talk when he was still with us. He put on this talk about early AA history at something called the State Line Convention in Las Vegas in 2016. And it was an absolute mind blower for me. And we took that and we created at my home group, Primary Purpose Group, PPG, Primary Purpose Group, what we call the foundation meeting. And essentially that's what I'm going to share with you guys tonight. We're going to share the foundation meeting with you guys tonight. We're going to do it through the forward to the second edition. Okay. And one of the things about reading the forward to the second edition is that there's a lot of really essential AA history. There's the beginning of AA history in the forward to the second edition. If you want to do a deep dive into AA history, brother, you can do it. Brothers and sisters, believe me, we've got history. We've got history on top of history. The start of it is in the forward of the second edition. So we're going to get into that together tonight. We're going to be on page XV in the book. Page XV, the forward to the second edition. And we're going to be aware that this was written in 1955. This is the second edition of the book that came out. Okay, and we're going to read through this together. And my man Brad is on the call. Hello, Brad. Brad's going to be our reader tonight, and I'm very grateful to you, Brad. Thank you for being here, and thank you for offering to read. And if you would be so kind, let's kick it off.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks everyone else. I'm Brad Sillito. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Forward to the second edition. Figures given in this forward describe the fellowship as it was in 1955. Since the original forward to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle has taken place. Our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination. Already, continues the early text, 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities.
Yeah, and as they're talking about that, 2s and 3s and 5s of us, like, can you imagine? Can you imagine like how fragile AA was at this point? Like 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other locations. What they mean is New York City, Akron, and Cleveland, basically, is what they're talking about. Okay, this is where AA was at this point. So you know, incredible that we've grown into what we've become today, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that right now.
16 years have elapsed between our first printing of this book and the presentation in 1955 of our second edition. In that brief space, Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed into nearly 6,000 groups whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. Groups are to be found in each of the United States and all the provinces of Canada. AA has flourishing communities in the British Isles, the Scandinavian countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, Alaska, Australia, and Hawaii. All told, promising beginnings have been made in some 15 foreign countries and U.S. possessions. Some are just now taking shape in Asia. Many of our friends encourage us by saying this is but a beginning, only the augury of a much larger future ahead. The spark that was to flare into the first AA group was struck in Akron, Ohio in June 1935 during a talk between a New York stockbroker and an Akron physician. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience. Following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of the day. He had also been greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, a New York specialist in alcoholism who is now accounted no less than a medical saint by AA members, and whose story of the early days of our society appears in the next pages. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God.
Okay, holy smokes, there's a lot to unpack in that little paragraph. Okay, and so I'm gonna try to do this justice, but I'm also gonna try to move through it quickly. So it says the spark that was to flare in the first AA group was struck in Akron, Ohio, June 1935, June 10th, 1935, to be specific, during a talk between a New York stockbroker. So that is Bill Wilson. When they're referring to the New York stockbroker, they're referring to our co-founder, Bill Wilson, and an Akron physician. When they're referring to that Akron physician, they're referring to Dr. Bob, another one of our co-founders, okay? So now they go backwards. They say 6 months earlier, the broker, Bill Wilson, had been relieved of his drink obsession because of his spiritual experience following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. Okay. So I want to start really foundationally, guys, talking about, and this is just some classic Joe and Charlie stuff. Okay. The three things that I need to learn as an alcoholic, that I need to understand as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, if I'm going to achieve recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, are really three things. I need to know what my problem is. I need to know I need a solution to that problem. And I need what Joe and Charlie refer to as a program of action. A program of action that I can do, most important word in AA, a program of action that I can do to achieve this solution to overcome this problem, okay? And the first thing that we're going to see here is that Bill Wilson, so what we're going to talk about right now is that Bill Wilson, further on in that paragraph, it says, from this Dr. Silkworth, the broker had learned of the grave nature of alcoholism. So the first thing we're going to talk about here, in terms of the problem, is the grave nature of alcoholism. Grave nature of alcoholism. And how do we get that? How did we get that? Bill Wilson got it from a doctor by the name of Dr. William D. Silkworth. And we're gonna go deep next week into the doctor's opinion. We're gonna talk about what this problem is, exactly what this problem is. At base, guys, we're gonna learn that there's a physical component, physical and a mental component, okay? A mental component. Physical allergy and a mental obsession. There's a physical component and a mental component to what has been characterized here as the grave nature of alcoholism. What I want to do now, though, guys, is I really want to, I kind of want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story about how this all kind of came together, okay? And we're going to start with this guy, okay? This is a man by the name of Rowland Hazard, okay? And Rowland Hazard was a rich kid, is what he was, okay? He was an heir to the Allied Dye and Chemical Factory fortune, or not factory, but the Allied Dye and Chemical Company fortune. He was a rich kid, and from time to time, he would have trouble in life. From time to time, he would have what they called back then an attack of the nerves, okay? He would have an attack of the nerves, and as a result of the attack of the nerves, from time to time, inadvertently, through no fault of his own, he would accidentally imbibe too much alcohol, okay? Now, at this time, a man of his stature and his social echelon could never be considered an alcoholic because alcoholics were those types under the bridge. Nonetheless, he was having a lot of trouble, okay? And I had mentioned we're going to bounce around in the book a little bit here. We're going to go to page 26. Now, I didn't know for years that this story was in our book, but it is. You go to page 26 and you can read on page 26. Brad, will you read for us? A certain American businessman.
Yes, a certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself to the care of the celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless,
relapse was unthinkable. Unthinkable, his relapse, okay? Anyone here, it says he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. I don't know about you guys, but there's been a lot of times in my life where, raise your hand if you ever finished your treatment with unusual confidence. You know, when you left the treatment center, about to get loaded again right away, okay? Yeah, that happens, it happens a lot. And I totally understand. I totally understand that. So Rowland Hazard, here's the deal, guys. Rowland Hazard, his parents were very, very wealthy, and he's having trouble. He's having trouble. He's having these nervous attacks, these anxiety attacks all the time, okay? And he can't stay sober. And what he's really succumbing to is this grave nature of alcoholism, though he does not realize it at the time. He is not aware that he has this problem. So his parents start shopping him around to different therapists. My parents did the same thing. Okay, shopping me around to different therapists until he could find one that works. But his parents were not like my parents. His parents had unlimited resources, had money on top of money on top of money. So they sent him around to the best psychiatrists in the United States until eventually they sent him to the celebrated psychiatrist, as it says, Dr. Carl Jung. Okay, so there's a picture of Carl Jung. Now, initially, they wanted to get him into what they felt was the best psychiatrist on the planet, who is a guy by the name of Sigmund Freud. Now, you guys may have heard of Sigmund Freud before. Very, very, very famous psychiatrist, okay? Freud was not taking any more patients at the time. And so here you'll see a picture. This is Carl Jung, that's Sigmund Freud, okay? And they were contemporaries. They had the same teacher, a guy named Adler, okay? And so when they couldn't get him in to see Sigmund Freud, they rather sent him to go see Carl Jung. And at that point, that is one of the first times in the early history of Alcoholics Anonymous where we got one of our first little coincidental breaks, okay? Because Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung differed in one area. They were contemporaries, they studied together, but Sigmund Freud believed that all problems of the human mind could be solved through what he called psychoanalysis, that I could just think my way through my problems, okay? I'm sure some of you probably fell to the same delusion, okay? We can just think our way through it, okay? But Carl Jung believed something else. So we're going to skip ahead, Brad. The long story short, Roland Hazard goes and he visits Carl Jung. He spends 1 year with Carl Jung. Okay, so first of all, can you imagine how much that would cost to have a psychiatrist like Carl Jung on retainer for an entire year? Okay, nonetheless, he finishes with Carl Jung. He leaves. Everything's great. He finished his treatment with unusual confidence, and he was struck drunk almost immediately. Okay, and he goes back to Carl Jung, and he's devastated. He can't believe he drank again. Okay, and he says to him, "Is there nothing I can do?" Carl Jung says to him, "You are a hopeless alcoholic. There is no chance for you." Roland Hazard said, "Is there no exception? Is there nothing that can happen to a guy like me?" And we'll see on page 27 where Carl Jung says, "Yes," replied the doctor.
Yes, replied the doctor, there is. There is exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I've never been successful with an alcoholic of your description.
Okay, so right there in that moment, Alcoholics Anonymous is given a gift. Sigmund Freud believed that all problems of the human condition could be solved through the mind. And if Roland Hazard would have went to see Sigmund Freud instead of Carl Jung, we would all be sitting around trying to psychoanalyze ourselves, talking about our dreams, talking about our mothers, trying to interpret what a cigar really means, drunk, okay? And thank God that Roland Hazard rather was gifted with this experience with Carl Jung, where we were given, as alcoholics, we were given the solution to alcoholism in that moment. Carl Jung gives us the key to the kingdom, and tells us that the solution for alcoholism, he believes, is what is known as a vital spiritual experience. Okay? Spirituality, getting connected to God of some kind. Okay? As being the solution in Alcoholics Anonymous. So our problem is the grave nature of alcoholism. Physical allergy, mental obsession. And we will unpack this greatly over the next many weeks as we go through step 1, particularly next week when we get into the doctor's opinion and we learn from Dr. Silkworth what our problem is. For right now, what I want to highlight is what our solution is. Our solution is this vital spiritual experience, and we get this from Dr. Jung, Dr. Carl Gustav Jung, okay? So Roland thinks, well, that's great. Great, it's good for me because I'm a church member, so I believe in God, okay? And just like I had said before, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. If all I needed to do was just come to AA and just get God, we would have a 2-step program and no one would ever relapse, okay? But it's not that easy. God is not just a switch that I can flip on and off, okay? There are things that I need to do in order to get connected to God, okay? And the 12 steps provide a program of action for me. So how do we get connected to the 12 steps? How do we get connected in the first place? Well, let's find that out, okay? So what happens, Roland goes to see Carl Jung. Carl Jung says, Roland, you've got to find God. I don't know how this is going to happen to you, okay? But if you don't find God, you're doomed to die. And the odds of this thing just happening to you out of the blue are like the odds of you getting struck by lightning. But, you know, good luck with that, okay? And by the way, here's my invoice. Pay this bill before you go, okay? So Roland Hazard goes back to the United States, and he's humbled and he's terrified. And he later wrote that all he wanted to do was stay sober long enough that he could give his parents a pleasant memory before he died drunk, which was imminent, okay? And he knew it. So as God would have it, around that time, there was a fellowship that was just starting to gain popularity. Started by this guy. This is Dr. Frank Buchmann, okay? Dr. Frank Buchmann was a Presbyterian minister who began to develop this program. It was initially called First Century Christian Movement, First Century Christianity Movement, okay? First century after what? First century, ideally after Jesus died. In that first century, he wanted to get back to that type of Christianity. Now, before you all start to exit the call, okay, as soon as I start talking about Jesus and Christianity, everybody just chill out, okay? I promise you, it's going to be okay. We are not a Christian organization. We are not a cult, anything like that. But the fact is, this is the early history of AA. This is where we came from. We got some ideas. We got some stuff. We got our program of action just from some simple actions that are common to most denominations. That's it. We took this program of action to get us connected to a solution, a God of our own understanding, to help overcome our alcoholic problem. So don't log off the call just yet. Stick with me. Everything is going to be fine. Okay. So Rowland Hazard comes back to the United States and he gets connected with this group. Now, by the time Rowland Hazard got connected with them, they were no longer called the First Century Christian Movement. They had been rebranded, if you will, to be known as the Oxford Group. Okay, and you may have heard around AA this concept of the Oxford Group, the Oxford Movement. The Oxford Group and the Oxford Movement were really nothing more than just, kind of upper middle class people who were deeply religious and spiritual and believed in God, but they wanted to have a deeper experience. And the Oxford Group simply gave them a series of steps that they could take to have this deeper understanding of spirituality and God in their own lives, okay? And Rowland Hazard puts two and two together. He says, well, I was just with Carl Jung. He told me I'm going to die drunk if I don't find God. And these Oxford Group people are telling me that I can get connected to God through a simple series of actions. And maybe if I do that, then I can get connected and I won't have to drink anymore. So if we go back to the forward to the second edition, you'll see towards the bottom of that paragraph we just read, it says that though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford Group, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. So those are the original actions that Frank Buchmann developed for the Oxford Group. I'm going to give you guys another little tidbit. If you go to page 263 in your book, if you go into the back of the book and there's a story. And if you go to page 263, you will see the original 6 steps of the Oxford Group. Okay, so starting, Brad, do you want to read it for us? The bottom of page 262, the day before?
Yeah. The day before I was due to go back to Chicago, it was Dr. Bob's afternoon off. He had me to the office and we spent 3 or 4 hours formally going through the 6-step program as it was at that time.
So I want to point out that does not say 3 or 4 years going through these steps. It does not say 3 or 4 months. It does not say 3 or 4 weeks. It doesn't even say 3 or 4 days. He says 3 or 4 hours going through the steps. Now, I'm not going to tell you guys that I take my sponsees through the steps in 3. Hey, Alex, how are you? Good to see you. I'm not going to tell you that I take my sponsees through the steps in 3 or 4 hours. That would not be accurate. But the point is that these steps originally were meant to be taken very, very quickly. We go through the steps, have the spiritual awakening as a result of those steps, and then go carry the message to someone else. When I do that, recovery rates in Alcoholics Anonymous were 50%. 50% of people who came to AA, when we live in that type of recovery, as opposed to what we see today, which is meeting-based recovery. Would you guys agree with that? You see a lot of that these days, meeting-based recovery. Just go to meetings and don't drink and everything will be fine. 90 meetings in 90 days or we'll refund your misery. And we go to these group therapy, middle of the road, watered down half measures AA meetings and sit around and talk about my problems and think that I've been to Alcoholics Anonymous and it didn't work. That's the biggest lie I ever told myself. I've been to AA and it didn't work. I hadn't even been close to AA. Anything less than the full expression of all of these actions and these steps in my life. And I am not doing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and my life is in peril. My life is in danger. Anything less than 100% effort, trying in all of these actions, not the ones that I like, not the ones that I want to do, but the ones that I have to do in order to achieve recovery in AA. Anything less than that, my life is in danger. So let's read what the original 6 steps of the Oxford group were, Brad.
The 6 steps were: 1, complete deflation. 2,
complete deflation. Deflation of what? Deflation of a bottle of vodka? Deflation of what? Deflation of ego. Deflation of the ego. Okay. And a surrender. We talk about surrender in Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay. Surrendering to the solution available to us in AA. Back to you, Brad.
2, dependence and guidance from a higher power. 3, moral inventory. 4, confession. 5, restitution. 6, continued work with other alcoholics.
Okay, so guys, you will see many times in our book the breakdown of our program of action, the breakdown of the 12 steps. Now, please, can you guys see this whiteboard? Is it okay? Can you read what I'm writing here?
Yep.
Yes? Okay. The breakdown of the 12 steps of our program, the breakdown is simply at base, keeping it very, very simple. Our program can be distilled into 4 major themes. Now, in no way am I trying to rewrite the 12 steps at all. The 12 steps are perfection. I believe that in the base of my heart. Okay, what I'm trying to do is just outline thematically what those 12 steps ask me to do. Initially, surrender. Surrender to what? Booze and drugs? Not exactly. What I'm being asked to do is surrender to a power. Surrender to a power and surrender to these actions and surrender to this solution. Okay, that's what steps 1, 2, and 3 are really about. Yes, initially I have to surrender to the problem, but then I need to surrender to the solution. And I need to make a decision that I'm going to do this solution. That's what I'm really doing in step 3. Okay, I'm making a decision that I want this thing. Surrender, confession, restitution, and service. Okay, the promise in Alcoholics Anonymous given to us by the Oxford group is that anyone who will do these actions can achieve a spiritual experience that will overcome and expel my problem. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Anyone who will do, most important word in Alcoholics Anonymous is the word do, D-O. Anyone who will do these actions can have this experience to overcome this problem, okay? So what happens? Roland Hazard joins this Oxford group and he starts doing this work, and lo and behold, he stays sober. He stays sober for the first time in his life as a result of doing this work. And his nervous anxiety and his nervous disposition begins to feel better. And he doesn't feel a need to drink anymore. And guys, what I always like to say is that I'm a recovered alcoholic who's not drinking today. I am sober today because I have found in AA, through this work, what I was always looking for in a bottle. I have found a way to feel easy and comfortable sober. I no longer have to drink in order to feel okay. I feel okay being who I am because of the power of God that I have accessed through these steps. Same thing happens to Roland Hazard. He starts doing this work. He has this reaction. He has this experience, rather, this spiritual experience. As a result of that spiritual experience, he then has this problem removed. And so what happens is another friend of his is having the same problem. Another friend of his, a guy by the name of Ebby Thatcher. Ebby Thatcher was a high school friend of his who could not stop drinking. And he was in the midst of, he was standing in front of a judge for his 3rd DUI in the state of Vermont. Okay, his third DUI in the state of Vermont. And on your third DUI, you go to jail. You go immediately to jail as soon as you get that third DUI in the state of Vermont back then. Okay. Personally, I think that's a little harsh, but anyway, that's a story for another time. Anyway. Okay, so Ebby Thatcher now is standing in front of the judge, and two of his friends come to see him, a guy named Shep Cornell and a guy named Seba Graves, come to court to try and speak on behalf of Ebby. And Ebby and Seba and Shep, I don't know where they get these names, but those are their names, thought to themselves, you know, Roland Hazard, because he's such a rich kid and his dad is so famous and well known and wealthy, he knows a lot of people. In fact, Roland's dad knew the judge. And so they brought Roland Hazard to court and said, maybe if you explain to him what we did, these actions that we took with you, maybe we can get Ebby out of having to go to jail. And so Roland Hazard came and spoke to the judge, and the judge said, only for you will I do this, Roland. Only for you, because I wouldn't do this for anyone else. But because I know you and I know your father, I'm going to be willing to let it go. And I'm going to let this guy, Ebby Thatcher, go. And we can read about this on page 8. Okay. We're going to go to page 8 in the book. Oh, sorry, page 9.
Yep.
This is the story of Ebby Thatcher when Ebby Thatcher goes to talk to our co-founder, Bill Wilson. Here's what he says, Brad, at the bottom of page 9, but he did no ranting.
But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked.
Okay, so he says, so Ebby Thatcher talks about how two men had appeared in court, okay, talking to the judge about the Oxford Group. So on Friday afternoon, Shep Cornell and Seba Graves come to the court and they say to the judge about the Oxford Group, and the judge is, you know, on the fence. He's like, I don't know. Ebby's going to go to jail for the weekend. Come back on Monday and we'll talk about it. On Monday, they bring Roland Hazard. On Monday, as evidence of what's happened to them with another guy who had a drinking problem, Roland knows the guy, his father knew the judge, and the judge let Ebby go. Now, what I like to point out here is that they said they spoke of a simple religious idea, our solution, and a practical program of action. That's it, guys. It's that simple. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. And we have a spiritual solution and we have a practical program of action to achieve that solution. And I remember the first time Joe and Charlie explained this and I heard them talk about it, I almost wanted to cry because I had been floundering around Alcoholics Anonymous for 5 years at that point, in and out of AA, 10 days drunk, 60 days drunk, another 30 days drunk, thinking that I'd been around. I'm going to meetings. I promise you, it was not for lack of going to meetings. There was a time in my life, brothers and sisters, where I was going to 5 meetings a day on the bus around Calgary. I had no job. I was unemployed. All I was doing was going to meetings. And I felt like I was dying of thirst laying next to a lake. Okay. And I did not know how to access what I saw you guys had. I didn't know why I was disconnected from it. I was sitting around in meetings all the time. Why is this not working? And when Joe and Charlie first laid it out like this the first time, I thought, my God, no, you're kidding. You're kidding. That's it. I just have to do this stuff and I can get connected to that power and I don't have to live this way anymore. That's the deal. That's the deal. And that's what Ebby Thatcher is explaining to Bill Wilson right now. Simply. He said these guys appeared in court and they talked of a simple religious idea. It was religious then. It's not religious now. In AA, it's just spiritual. Talked of a simple spiritual idea and a practical program of action. That was it. Okay. So Ebby Thatcher then gets removed from court. Okay. He doesn't have to go to jail. After a couple months, the guys at the Oxford Group say to him, Ebby, we want you to start working this last step of being of service. We want you to go testify to someone. And Ebby says, I don't want to go testify to anybody. That's embarrassing, man. I'm not going to do that. I'll do the rest of it, but I'm not going to do that testimony stuff. They said, you want to go testify to someone, or do you want to go to jail in Vermont? And suddenly he was struck with the spirit of service. Okay. And he thinks to himself, who is the biggest loser that I know of in alcoholics? Biggest drunken blackout mooch sitting, living off his wife. He'll be so drunk off his ass when I go see him, he won't even remember I was there. All right. Enter our co-founder, Bill W. Bill W. Okay. And so we just read Ebby Thatcher comes to Bill. And by the way, one of the things I like to always point out, how long had Ebby Thatcher been sober when he goes to see Bill Wilson? 2 months. 2 months sober. Okay. So if you're here and you're new to AA and you're thinking, man, I don't have much to contribute in AA, you know, Kevin talks about this service stuff and I don't know how to do this service stuff, you know, I don't know, like I don't have much to offer. Hey, I want to point out the genesis of our program is when a guy who was 2 months sober went and talked to a friend of his who was a drunk, who was still drinking. That's the beginning of our program. All right. So if you're here and you're in your first year, I promise you, you have a lot to give and a lot that you can share. Okay. So Ebby Thatcher goes to carry this message to Bill Wilson. Now, guys, Bill gets sober. We're going to go, now we're going to flip back to the forward of the second edition. Okay. So we're on page XVI again. Okay. And we're going to be at prior to his journey to Akron. So Bill Wilson gets sober again. December 11th, 1934 is his sobriety date. For anyone who's interested, December 11th, 1934, Bill Wilson goes back into the hospital and he gets sober again. For the next 6 months, Bill Wilson continues to work with other alcoholics. Okay, he continues to work and try to get other people sober. And for a time, Alcoholics Anonymous, we were known as the drunk squad of the Oxford group. Alcoholics Anonymous didn't exist yet. The only thing that existed was Oxford group, right? And I always like to, you know, laugh and think about like these poor little old ladies who are going to have their nice little church meeting, and they get their little silver tea set out and their little doilies, and they're going to have a nice little church meeting with all their friends. And Bill Wilson kicks the door open with some puking street drunk on his elbow, right? Trying to get this guy sober in the Oxford group. But that's what it was. That it was humble beginnings for AA. So, Brad, if you could, please read from prior to his journey to Akron on forward to the second edition, page XVI, guys.
Prior to his journey to Akron, the broker had worked hard with many alcoholics on the theory that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic, but he had succeeded only in keeping sober himself. The broker had gone to Akron on a business venture which had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear that he might start drinking again. He suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. That alcoholic turned out to be the Akron physician.
Okay, so what I always like to point out here, guys, and this is like one of the magical tipping points in AA. Bill Wilson spent 6 months trying to carry this message to other drunks. But what message is he trying to carry? He's not talking about the grave nature of alcoholism. Unfortunately for Bill, he was trying to sell them on this vital spiritual experience. Okay, and he was trying to sell these drunks on the idea that they too could find God and so on and so forth. And it was not a good sales pitch for drunks. They didn't want to hear about it. And so nobody got sober for 6 months. And Bill Wilson almost quit. He almost quit and almost gave up. And one night he goes home and he talks to his wife, Lois, who'd been working at the department store. And Bill said, Lois, I want you to know that I'm sorry. This has obviously just been a huge mistake. I spent 6 months trying to work with these drunks and none of them are getting sober. And I want you to know I'm going to quit. I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to start contributing to the household again. And this has obviously been a failure because none of these guys are sober. And in that moment, your life and mine hung by a thread. Because if Bill Wilson gives up in that moment, Alcoholics Anonymous never happens. But Lois Wilson, his wife, the founder of Al-Anon, said something in that moment that changed the course of human history and saved the life of everyone on this call right now. Does anyone know what she said? She said, Bill, you stayed sober. You are staying sober, and that's all I care about. You keep doing what you're doing, and I don't care. And Bill said, that's right, Lois. That's right. That's good. Yeah, no, you're right. Good. I was checking. It's good that you caught that. I I thought the same myself, but I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. Okay. So Bill goes to Dr. Silkworth. He goes to Dr. Silkworth and he says, Dr. Silkworth, why are none of these guys get sober? He said, Bill, because you're leading with the God thing, man. Nobody wants to hear about it. I'm getting sick of hearing you talk about what a holy roller you are. Why don't you tell them what I told you? Why don't you talk to them about the grave nature of the disease that you have, the hopelessness, the physical allergy, the mental obsession? Tell them about that, and then maybe you'll have more success, okay? So Bill Wilson, as it says, travels to Akron, Ohio, okay? He travels to Akron, Ohio, and business deal falls through, and he's standing in the lobby of the Mayflower Hotel. There's a picture of the Mayflower Hotel, okay? And in that moment, Bill Wilson realizes that he's going to drink again. He's in the hotel lobby, and down the hall, he can hear the bar. He can hear people laughing and music, and if he's like me, man, he can probably hear the ice clinking in the glasses in the bar, right? Like he's got the obsession of the mind all over him. But in that moment, Bill Wilson is restored to sanity. And I always like to point this out, guys. Okay, that recovery is it's like making deposits in a spiritual bank account. Okay, and I make these deposits so that at some point down the road, when the fit hits the shan, okay, I can make a big withdrawal and not come up insufficient funds from my spiritual bank account. Okay, Bill Wilson is a real alcoholic. He's not just standing in the Mayflower Hotel and just suddenly decides he doesn't want to drink. He's an alcoholic, man. We drink. That's what we do. But in that moment, Bill Wilson is restored to sanity by spirituality. And what I like to point out is that just didn't happen out of the blue. Bill Wilson had made a lot of deposits into his spiritual bank account. Guys, what had he just spent the previous 6 months doing? He had spent the previous 6 months carrying the message, trying to get other people sober. And every time he did that, he was putting another deposit into the bank account. Does that make sense to you guys? He was doing the work, and because he was doing the work, when the rubber meets the road and he wants to drink in the middle of the Mayflower Hotel, he's restored to sanity. And instead, he goes and he picks up a telephone and he starts dialing, he starts calling people. And he gets connected, long story short, he gets connected to our other co-founder, a guy by the name of Dr. Bob, okay? Dr. Bob Smith. Now it says at the bottom, maybe Brad, back to you. If you could read the bottom of page XVI, the physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means.
This physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. But when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with the willingness he had never before been able to muster.
So believe it or not, guys, Dr. Bob had actually been a member of the Oxford group, okay? So he had a vague sense of what the solution to his problem was. He certainly knew what the program of action was, but what piece did Dr. Bob not know? Dr. Bob did not know the hopelessness of his drinking problem. And once Dr. Bob, like Bill Wilson, had all three pieces, once he knew what the problem was, once he knew what the solution was, once he knew what the program of action was, once he had all three pieces of that information, he sobered on June 10th, 1935, never to drink again. Okay? So listen, guys, I want to be mindful of the time here, guys. That is the early history of AA. And one of the things I want to point out about Bill Wilson as well, one of the things that is very special about Bill Wilson, the only thing that's special about Bill Wilson, and he's not smarter than any of us, he's not more successful than any of us, he's not more spiritual than any of us. Bill Wilson is just the first guy in the history of the world to have all three pieces of this information. He's the first guy to know what the problem was, to know what the solution was, and to understand what the program of action was, okay? And he gets that when Ebby Thatcher brings him the message of what had happened to him when he was standing in court through Roland Hazard, and he had understood what the problem was from Dr. Silkworth. Once Bill Wilson had all three pieces of this information, an alcoholic like him, like me, like all of us, was able to stay sober, okay? And one of the things I like to point out, guys, as well, Dr. Silkworth, we get the problem from Dr. Silkworth. Was he an alcoholic? No, he was not. Dr. Young, Dr. Carl Jung, gives us the solution. Was he an alcoholic? No, he was not. Program of action we get from the Oxford group. Was the Oxford group alcoholic? No, they were not. Okay? And I think that God finally brought together 3 non-alcoholics, brought them together divinely to deliver a message to their alcoholic brothers and sisters so that people like us don't have to die drunk anymore. Okay, you guys with me on that? Jails, institutions, and death. Prior to this, man, prior to this, that was the prescription. Jails, institutions, death. People like us died in institutions, screaming at the moon, dying horrible alcoholic deaths. That was all that was available to people like us. And as a result of these great men bringing this work together, men and women in the Oxford group, bringing this together, people like me can stay sober. Now, I'm gonna skip ahead, guys, here, okay? We're not gonna read all of it tonight, but I want to point out at the bottom of page XIX, okay? What I want to read about are the percentage, the success rates in early Alcoholics Anonymous. So between 1939 and 1955, when we stayed close to this program of action as laid out in this book to get connected to this solution and then go carry the message to another alcoholic. When I stay close to that message and that message alone, what did recovery rates look like in Alcoholics Anonymous? At the bottom of page XIX, it says, while the internal difficulties of our adolescent period, Brad, if you could read that paragraph for us, please.
While the internal difficulties of our adolescent period were being ironed out, public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were 2 principal reasons: the large numbers of recoveries and reunited homes. These made their impressions everywhere. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way.
50%. 50% of people who came to Alcoholics Anonymous, guys, 1939 to 1955, 50% got sober right away. Now, I don't know y'all in what your home groups are like, man. But my home group right now, we work really hard, but we cannot claim 50% recovery rates, man. Okay? And Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide, we're talking like single-digit recovery numbers. Okay? Percentage numbers. But in 1939 to 1955, when all that there was this book, this program of action, the 12 steps, doing that work, and then going to carry the message to someone else. When we stayed close to that fundamental message, 50% of people who came to AA got sober right away. I think that I can say with assurance and with honesty, of the guys that I sponsor, 50% get sober. 50% of the guys that I sponsor get sober. And that is not because of anything I am doing that is special, other than knowing that this book is special. And my sponsees stay close to this book and nothing else. Okay? They stay close to this book. They have a home group. They get a commitment at their home group. They stay close to their sponsor. They stay close to the message in this book. We go through these steps rapidly, and then immediately I want them working with other people. I want them making that transition. What's the transition, guys, from being a taker to being a, everybody say on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, giver, giver. Okay, I want them giving back to Alcoholics Anonymous as soon as possible, as soon as they're lit up by the fire of God that has been ignited by the spark that was started by Bill and Bob in Akron, Ohio, June 10th, 1935. Okay, they wrote this book. This book went out into the world, and all that I need in order to attain real, genuine spiritual recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous and transform my entire life is in this book. I believe that. Okay. And so with the guys that I sponsor, 50% stay sober, not because I'm special at all, because this book is special, because God is special and God is real. And I believe, guys, I believe with my whole heart, the actual recovery rates in Alcoholics Anonymous for people who will come and will do this work, I believe that the recovery rates are 100%. 100%, because our program is based on God, and God is infallible. If God is fallible, he's not God by definition. So if you're here and you're new and you're scared, and I understand, brothers and sisters, I understand about that fear. Is this going to work for me? Yes, it will work for you. The question is, are you going to work for it? Are you willing to do the work that is required in Alcoholics Anonymous? You go, we talk about tradition 3. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, right? That's the only requirement for membership, right? But the requirements for long-term sustained recovery are much different, much more stringent, much more demanding. Very, 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 very hard work that needs to go in to my recovery. I can't tell you guys how hard I have to work to just stay baseline normal. Okay. I don't know why it is. Okay. But it's a joy. It's a treat. And I get to be here with you guys, and I get to see this thing take off in y'all. And I can't tell you, I've been doing this big book study for 15 years, brothers and sisters. And I can't tell you how many people I've got to see grow and change and evolve their entire lives, man. It's unbelievable. When we're talking about that 50%, we're talking about lives. We're talking about human lives, man. Okay. And don't forget, behind every newcomer is an invisible family. Behind every newcomer is an invisible family of people that we don't always get to meet, but we are transforming their lives as well, as surely as we're transforming our own. You guys with me on that? Okay. I do this work to achieve this solution to overcome this problem, man. It's that simple. Okay. If I do this work, I get well. If I don't do this work, I don't get well. Okay. Brad, why don't you finish reading that paragraph for us, and we will we'll end for tonight.
I closed my book.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I know it seemed like I was probably kind of wrapping up there. So it says, I'll read it, Brad. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses. So that's 75%. And among the remainder of those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Other thousands came to a few AA meetings and at first decided they didn't want the program. But great numbers of these, about 2 out of every 3, came to return as their time passed. You know, one of the first requirements for recovery is that I have to decide that I wanted what what Alcoholics Anonymous had to offer. Okay. Now you may be here and you may be new and you may not be sure if you want what we have. But if you're absolutely sure that you no longer want what you have, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. You may not be ready to come to believe in God just yet, but if you have come to believe in the hopelessness of your own situation, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And we are here to help you in any way that we can. Okay? That's it, guys. I love you all very much. Thank you for being here. We're going to close with the Lord's Prayer. And then my favorite part, as you guys know, my favorite part of the night is we're going to go around and we're all just going to introduce ourselves. Just unmute yourself. Let us know your name and where you're from. Because I think the Big Book Compendium is just the coolest thing in the world, man. And we get to meet people from all over the world, and it's the best. So if you guys would be kind enough, help me close with the Lord's Prayer. And then we're going to just do a little around the table, okay? So, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth
as it is in heaven.
Give us this
Give
day
us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, great stuff, you guys. And so now, I love doing this. This is my favorite part. This is my favorite part for sure. So we're gonna, thank you all. Thanks everyone who's thanking us furiously in the group chat there. So that's all good. So we will start with DL.
Sorry, Kevin. Kevin, can you kill the recording, please?
I was just trying to stop it, Rob.
Okay.
I don't know how to do that.